he said that one of the things that he intended to do was to extend the territory of the United States. That was a fairly remarkable statement. That is not what we are supposed to say these days. Putin says it, but otherwise leaders are not supposed to extend their territory.
Now, Donald Trump has praised Keir Starmer, saying that he's doing a very good job so far, and says he'll be having a call with the Prime Minister sometime today. Now, the two men haven't spoken since Trump became president last Monday. Now, speaking to reporters on Air Force One overnight, Trump also said that he believes the US will gain control of Greenland, saying, "I think we are going to have it," adding that the island's 57,000 residents want to be with us. His comments come after reports that the Danish Prime Minister insisted Greenland was not for sale in a rather heated phone call with the President last week. Well, I'm delighted to now be joined by Carl Bildt, the co-chair of the European Council on Foreign Relations and former Prime Minister of Sweden. Carl, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, Donald Trump's comments about Greenland were initially reported as a bit of a joke. Everybody was laughing about it, but he's doubling down on it. I mean, is Europe going to have to take him seriously on this?
I think we need to take him seriously. You are correct. He was treated as somewhat of an oddity when he came first. But then, of course, he sent his son up there with a fairly odd expedition. And all of the information that I see is that the close circle around Trump himself, they are deadly serious about this. They want to, and he said, don't forget that, his inaugural address, he said that one of the things that he intended to do was to extend the territory of the United States. That was a fairly remarkable statement. That is not what we are supposed to say these days. Putin says it, but otherwise leaders are not supposed to extend their territories.
And what would be the ramifications for Europe if Donald Trump were to succeed in bringing Greenland under his control?
Well, the ramification for the world, because we are talking about, if you talk the rules-based global order, it's based on respect for rules and principles. The most fundamental of those is respect for territorial integrity. If you suddenly say that here's a small nation, I'm going to grab part of its territory because I want it for the one or the only reason, or the one or the other reason, then of course you can well see that inspiring others around the world to say, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So implications are, needless to say, there for Denmark, for Greenland, but we should not neglect what it means, undermining one of the very basic rules of the international order.
And if he were to do this, I presume as well it would very much weaken his argument with President Putin about what's happening in Ukraine.
Well, certainly it would. And so Mr. Putin would be very happy with this. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu was also fairly interested in acquiring territory that belongs to other states, will also applaud openly or silently. And there might be, I dealt quite a number of years with the situation in the Balkans some time ago, and I can name you a number of people in the Balkans who consider this a good idea as well. Grabbing territories is a popular thing in certain parts of the world, but it's not a good thing.
Yes, it could set a dangerous precedent. And look, how do you think other senior leaders across Europe are treating this? Is this something, is there sort of backroom diplomacy going on right now? Is this something that you think is being raised with leaders?
I think it will happen, but I don't think it's there as of yet, because as you indicated at the beginning, I don't think very many took it that seriously in the beginning. I think it is serious. And I think primarily the Commission in Brussels will have to start to look at all of the implications. I mean, if Trump threatens with tariffs, which is one of his favorite things to do, one should note that Denmark, in a sense, doesn't exist. Denmark is part of the customs union, as all other members of the European Union. So then it's a trade war with the European Union as such. And that means that what happens in Brussels, which is going to be our defense mechanism, is going to be very important.
And as I read out in my introduction, Trump had some warm words for the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. He said he's doing a very good job so far. The two men are expected to have a phone call. How do you think the UK should balance the relationship between Europe and America? And do you think that President Trump will want to kind of use Britain to sort of drive try and kind of drive a wedge between the UK and Europe and make life quite difficult for UK by saying to us, look, you have to choose either us or them?
Could well be. He's not a friend of the European Union. That is hardly unknown. And if we look at the track record, what happened during his first term in office, he did try to divide the European nations. He essentially failed to do that because they stuck together, because there's so much that unites us. But I'm quite certain that he's going to try to play that particular game again. And if he can use the UK as well, I'm quite certain he will try.
And what's your advice to the UK? Because there's a big debate happening right now, Carl, in Britain, particularly in, our comment pages. Who should Britain tip towards? Should we try and ride both horses? But there's also many people saying, actually, no, Britain should lean more towards Europe. What would you say?
Well, I mean, the ideal thing, which is, I guess, what the UK government is going to say, is that they want a good relationship with both. I mean, it's fairly obvious for reasons that have nothing to do with Trump that there is a need to have a closer relationship between the UK and the rest of Europe. That has to do with the security situation and Putin and all of the challenges that we face. It also has to do with economic issues and the threats or the challenges that we're facing there. But then, of course, relationship with the United States is important for all of us. That's fairly obvious.
And look, and our Chancellor Rachel Reeves was doing some breakfast media this morning, and you just mentioned the customs union, and she said that she would be happy to look at joining some kind of pan-European customs union. Let's have a listen to what she said.
We are absolutely happy to look at these different proposals because we know that the deal that the previous government secured is not working well enough. It's not working well enough for small businesses trying to export. It's not working well enough for larger businesses either. We're grown up to admit that, whereas the previous government said there were no problems at all.
Do you think that you could see the UK maybe joining something like the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention, a sort of a pan-customs union? Do you think that would be a good idea for Britain?
Well, I think Brexit was a terrible idea, so you shouldn't ask me that particular question. But in terms of customs union, there's only one customs union, and that is the one that is run by the European Union. And you're either part of it or not. You can be associated with it. Turkey is, for example. You can also be part of the single market in the way that, for example, Norway is. If the UK wants to do that, there's no question that there will be support for that in the European Union. There was much regret by primarily Brexit. But also there was a hope that the UK at that time would settle for either the customs union or the single market. There are drawbacks of that if you're not a member, but it's better than being completely outside in the way that you are today.
Well, look, Carl, thank you so much for your time. A really interesting conversation.
Thank you.
That's Carl Bildt, co-chair of the European Council on Foreign Relations and the former Prime Minister of Sweden.